Hello friends and welcome. Today we're going to do a tier list for the best hard supports in your pub games. This is what you should play to win MMR, or maybe just playing unranked, that's fine. You want to smash people, these are the heroes to play. This one is based on the pro meta right now, and we're going to adjust it, move these around, because you guys have mentioned that in the past tier list. You don't care as much about the pro scene because you don't play in the professional scene, you want to play your pubs. So that's what we're going to do today. If you're interested in the pro scene, then this is it. It's really like these top few heroes, and then sometimes in the B tier. Everything below that is extremely uncommon. Now for your pubs, let's start in the D tier and then move things up if they need to be. So, Hoodwink, I think, for position 5 is not great, just because, in general, compared to other heroes, her facets and innate ability aren't amazing. That's kind of what's defining the support meta right now, is whoever got the most free stuff from their facets and innate abilities, and they tend to be lane dominators, and at the pro level, they tend to be very flexible. So Hoodwink can win lanes with good acorn shot bounces, but as a position 5, it means you're probably shoving out the lane, and that's a little awkward. Hoodwink also wants to play pretty greedily, and as a position 5, just not really supposed to be doing that. Coddle, his recall facet, again, not amazing. Other people are getting new stuff. He's just getting old stuff moved around, same as Hoodwink. So also not great. And as a support right now, it's a little tough, especially in pub games. You're probably accidentally griefing if you don't know what you're doing, blasting out waves like with Illuminate, especially in the laning stage. So it's just a little harder to pull off. And then he's like a coordination hero in general. So that's missing in pub games, and then you don't really get the strength of Coddle. You just have the weaknesses. Dazzle. Okay, we can move Dazzle up. I'm not fully sure where. So the thing with Dazzle is that your laning stage is... Let's move him in B tier for now while we talk it through. So his laning stage is heavily based on how good Poison Touch is. Oh shit, guys, I'm gonna forget. We're gonna talk about Dazzle again when we get to the B tier. Well, we'll see. We'll see how we do. Poison Touch, how good of a game... how good your lane is based on Poison Touch, where you use it and you hit it, and if you refresh it constantly, you get a lot of value out of it. Great. The thing is that there's a decent chunk of meta Dispel heroes right now, especially in the off lane, such as Legion and Abaddon in your pub games. And when you play against them, Poison Touch doesn't really do anything. Or if you play against some of these popular ranged position 4s, so you play against Weaver, you're not really getting Poison Touch value. Again though, this meta does not necessarily apply to your pub games. So in that case, you can get good Poison Touch value, and Grave is really good in your games where they carry the mid, they're diving too hard, they're feeding, right? You're saving it. The enemy team is diving you too hard, you're graving, you're healing your team. So that part's cool. Facet-wise, I just think it's just not as good as others in the grand scheme of things, but for, the pub experience, Dazzle still works, and I think I'm going to have him in the B tier for now. I'm going to move techies. I can't just put them all in the B tier. This is the problem with pub games. Everything works, and that means everything's, similar tier. I think techies is probably a little better in pubs. Okay, I swear we're going to change this, but for now, again, we're going to put him in B tier. So the thing with techies, why he dropped out of the pro scene, is that his attack range got nerfed. It used to be 700, went down to 550, recently got buffed again back to 600, but it's still worse than it used to be, and that used to be his thing. He just poked a lot in the laning stage, threw out some Qs, harassed you, and then eventually commits with E. Now, other heroes are stronger because of their innate abilities and facets. Now, he has some interesting ones. In particular, for hard support, I think Spoon Stash is the one it's called, where you can use your backpack slots as actual inventory slots. I think that has a lot of potential, and especially in pub games that tend to go long, that means you have tons of extra space to work with, whether that is casual, Bracer Null Talisman you get extra value from, or at some point you're putting in, Aether Lens and Aghanims in there because it's going super late. Neutral items work in there, by the way, if you didn't know. So at the start, doesn't matter too much, like Iron Branches, but as you get to that 10-20 minute mark, then in pub games, that's still, the game's still being decided. At the higher level games, if you don't already have an advantage at 20 minutes, right, it's I'd rather pick a support that can do that. And that's why techies dropped off, but for the pub games, that is when you can start putting in your tier 1 neutral item, your tier 2 neutral item, your tier 3 neutral item, and then you have your tier 4 in your neutral item slot, right? So there's a lot of potential value there, and I think that's where he starts to look better in pub games. Oh, this is gonna be a long video. Okay, we're gonna go a little faster for the heroes that don't matter as much, as in they're at like lower tier. So like Skywrath, I'm gonna put him in C tier for now. He's just a better position 4 because the items he wants to build are greedier. He doesn't really want to build like a bunch of defensive support items as a position 5 because he wants to be scaling like Atos, things like that. So I'd rather see him as a position 4. As a position 5 though, again, those pub games tend to go long, so you do eventually reach that itemization, so it's kind of fine, but I'm gonna leave him in C tier for now. Dawnbreaker for pubs, I think is pretty okay. I don't know, your laning stage is still awkward compared to some of these other heroes, but people underestimate your WQ combo, and you can like all in get some kills that way, and then off those kills, you end up high level, you show up to other lanes, you scale well because you've been played as a core hero before, global ultimate, so you can just show up to different fights. I think that has a lot of strength in pub games, but I would say like the lower rank you are, the more it works out. The higher up in MMR you go, maybe something more typical meta would be better. Omni Knight. Ooh, this one's... So he's a pub classic, which is that people never respect the ultimate and the repel, and then he just ends up like top tier. Currently, his facets and innate abilities are pretty bad compared to other supports. So even in pubs, his win rate is relatively low. I think it's like 45-ish, which is not the worst, but for Omni Knight, who's usually 50 plus, that's pretty bad. So again, I think the lower MMR you go, probably still like A tier hero just because people dive and they don't understand the ult. They never counter it with dispels, things like that. But right now, in the grand scheme of things, I actually would keep him pretty low. But we'll move him to C tier maybe instead of D tier. Muerta has pretty good scaling potential, but you really have to be able to hit the skill shots. I think she's a pretty tricky support to run, and she's a lot better as a position 4 than a position 5. If you know what you're doing, you can make it work, but I'm actually going to leave her in the D tier. Wind Ranger, I think we will move up, maybe C tier. I think she's a better core right now than support. Again, like if you want it to work in pubs, it will, but I just think there's better hard supports than Wind Ranger, so you have to want this to work. Then I think it's kind of okay. And if you were going to run it as a support, I think position 4 makes more sense for her because again, she has like a lot of scaling potential, so she wants items, and supports are more farm nowadays than they used to be, but position 4 is going to fit better than position 5. So I was pushing for Leshrac support when a couple patches ago, I guess. Right now, I think it's just not as good as other supports, but it's okay if you really wanted to do it. Again, I'm gonna leave it in D tier just because the innate ability and facets make a lot more sense for core Leshrac than support Leshrac. So you can do it. There's worse heroes, but there's a lot better heroes as well. Batrider, I think I'm actually going to move Batrider down in the pub scene. So Batrider support is kind of tricky to run if you don't know what you're doing. And he used to be better. He just got nerfed. For example, Napalm lost the vision it applied. So you can't check high ground wards with it anymore. You have to use Firefly, things like that. I think as a position 4, sort of still works. I think as a core hero, Batrider works. I think as a pub support, this guy needs to play greedy, and that is going to grief a lot, especially in the lower ranked games where you need to go like stack jungle and farm it, and your carry's going to die while you're gone. And then they're going to flame you, and you're like, Batrider support's useless. And you're like, well, in this game, when I can't do what I want, yeah, I'm kind of useless. So I think he's just tricky to run. I think the higher up in MMR you go, there are still people who like Batrider support. At the pro level, you sometimes see it, but I think a lot of times it's just like the flex potential, and it's like, okay, we have to run 5 Bat, or like, oh, there's a good matchup. None of that's like applicable to pubs. So I'm actually going to move him down to D tier for this. Lich goes up. Lich is A tier, maybe S tier. He's one of the highest win rate supports in terms of all games played. Both his facets are good, and his innate ability allows you to spam spells in the laning stage more than you used to be able to, and he's a bit of a lane bully. And then your ultimate, it was pretty hit or miss in the past. If you got unlucky with bounces, or you're just panic ulting and then you got no value out of it. But now, depending which facet you take, both of them have a positive win rate. But I don't know. Both are good, so it just kind of depends. But both make his ultimate way better and easier to use than before. One of them makes it so like if you do send it somewhere where there's no bounces, it just like floats around and might jump to someone if they walk in range, so that makes it a lot better. The other one adds bounces if it kills creeps or heroes, which makes it a lot easier to use like in the middle of a team fight with a bunch of summons, stuff like that. So either one really solid, and just based on pubs, he's got a really high win rate. So if you want to be a Lich 5 player, like now's the time. Bane, I think we can keep Bane in the C tier, maybe B tier. I think if you know what you're doing, he's good. And with the Nightmare change, the sleepwalking, there's some like really cool uses for that. But Bane is another one of those heroes that does better with good coordination and good combos off of Nightmare, and you're going to get teammates who Nightmare themselves. So you know, but I think his win rate is like 49%, which is really fine. So maybe he could be like B tier. Well, in the same way, like you have teammates who don't know how to use Nightmare, you'll have enemies that don't know how to deal with Nightmare. So yeah, I don't know, somewhere between C and B tier. Let's just leave him here for now. But if you know how to play Bane, you can definitely move him up a tier or two. Warlock, S tier. S tier hero. He is really strong right now. His innate ability just spawns imps from all spells potentially, which is crazy good. Classic best scaling support potentially between Fatal Bonds and the ultimate. Both facets are really good. Champion of Goroth has a better win rate because it scales better the longer the game goes, which in your pub games, it goes quite long. So he's the classic. Play him if you are, I don't know, like outside of Immortal, is probably a safe bet. Even in your Immortal pubs, it's probably okay, but you know, again, like probably following the meta makes a little bit more sense in the Immortal bracket and higher, but anywhere below that, like the games just do go long, and at some point you get a really good ultimate with Fatal Bonds, and then you win. That's it. Even if it goes like super late, the Champion of Goroth scaling is insane. So S tier, I'd put him in the front, but I'm going to keep him in the back just because like, not that the order strictly matters, but we're going to keep him in the back so we remember who we've already talked about. Pugna, I might move Pugna down a tier. He can stay in C tier. The issue with Pugna when you play him as a hard support is that he's very annoying in the laning stage, long range attack, harass, things like decrepify, kind of high ceiling to use that correctly, but let's say you know how to play Pugna, fine. But the thing is, like the reason you pick Pugna over other supports is that you enable your team by healing them with your ultimate, setting up like zones to fight around with like your ward, and all that is just lacking in pub games, especially the lower you go. Ancient, Divine, and higher, like if you really want to run it, I think it's probably okay, but it's going to be a lot easier to run others. You're going to have to be willing to communicate, and you're going to have like a Storm Spirit mid, right? Someone who wants to use mana that you can play with. And a lot of times you get like a triple greedy core lineup, and then you're like, I have nothing to do. I don't know what to do. I'm lost. And that's what happens in pubs. And that's why I don't think he's very good as you get to like the average pub game or lower. So I would probably like in those kind of games, I'd even move him down, but at least you can push towers and things like that, which is like kind of cool. So yeah, I'll leave him in C tier for now. Undying, I'm going to move up, maybe A or B tier. There's a lot of popular strength offlaners right now, so he can just body them. And then like Tombstone is underappreciated in pub games. You get a lot of value out of that way. I think his facet Ripped is pretty cool. I have not seen him that much in my own games yet, but like for those pub games, I think you can really stomp the lanes where people don't know how to like, oh, there's an Undying. I should prioritize pull camps. I should be like creep cutting. We should sack the offlaner and win the other lanes, right? Pub games don't really adjust that well to that kind of thing. They're just like, let's just keep going to the offlane and keep getting killed by Decay Tombstone, right? Man, this lane's impossible. I hate Undying. Like, they don't know how to adjust to it. So I think because of that, it ends up being pretty good. I think we can leave Marcy in C tier. I think she's a bit better as a core hero right now. And if you do want to play her as a support, her scaling is still there as the game goes. But you do tend to want to build like greedier, like Phase Boots, Basher, BKB, and you know, position 5. Should you be doing that every single game? Probably not. So I'm gonna leave her in C tier. If you know what you're doing, it can work. But there's easier 5s. But if you really want to bank on the fact that you can scale and that maybe you can get kills off of like WQ in the laning stage that people don't expect because there's some like repositioning there, which is totally true. So if you know how to abuse that stuff, then that's fine. But again, it's a hero that wants to play greedy, and position 5 is just usually not the place for that. Shadow Shaman got endlessly nerfed recently, but I still think he's really good for pub games. Let's stick him in A tier for now. He's the classic, right? You can push down lanes on your own and then drop your ult to take towers. I think your innate ability is still really nice to help you keep yourself alive, even though it just got nerfed a little bit. But it's still a free tool he didn't have before. Cluster Cluck and the other one, the Mega Ward, whatever it's called, both pretty interesting. And in your pub games that just go long, either the split push with the ultimate, the late game scaling with like Ag's Refresher ultimate, or potential pickoffs when people like dive too hard and you like hex shackle them for 10 years and you get them killed off and then you just win the game because they don't have buyback, right? There's a lot of tools here to win a pub game. And I think that brings him up to like at least A tier. Not a huge fan of Mirana support right now. If you really like it, I think you can still do it. It's pretty much the same as it was before. You would still take the Invis talent or Invis facet most of the time. I think Solar Flare, there's probably some cool lineups you can make that work. And I haven't explored it too much myself, admittedly. So maybe there's some potential there. But I from what I've seen, like you play it the same old way. And as long as you have setup on your team, it works, but that's the issue, right? You're gonna have like anti-mage carry, and it's like, how am I gonna land these arrows in the laning stage? You just have to like blindly do it. And if you can, fantastic. But if you can't, then it would have been much easier to be someone else. Now at the higher levels, when they're picking like Chaos Knight carry, and maybe like there's some Venge carry going on, right? I think there's some cool arrow setups that do work. Maybe your 4 support picks someone to set it up, so you have like roaming potential, all that, right? That's where in pubs you're just lacking. Now, the benefit in pubs is that they do tend to go late, you scale up, and at some point you hit an arrow and you just win off of that in the late game. So that's why I think like if you do like Mirana, you can play her, but I will probably still leave her in the C tier compared to other supports. Rubik, I think, does enough in pub games as a 5 that we could maybe move him up. He doesn't mind building things like Glimmer, Force, stuff like that to support his team while just playing the backlines. He does like to go greedy with like Blink, Aether Lens, Ag, stuff like that. But you don't have to as a position 5, but you can if the game goes late enough. So I think that's where he's like maybe B tier, and then you just like steal some good spells, of which there are many. And in particular, Weaver support is really good right now. So if you like steal Shikuchi, that's one of the best spells you could get. There's like some other powerful spells up here that you could see. So I think in a pub game, the scaling is there. The laning is actually probably a little more awkward, depending if you're like in a lower ranked pub game where it's like a little dicey. So, you know, your mileage may vary on that. Ogre, I think we can move him to A tier. The learning curve is actually pretty strong. Gives you a really good level 2 power spike. Just play, like, don't go crazy level 1. You don't want to burn all your health before you even hit your power spike. So just like do the bare minimum, hit level 2, and then go ham. Try to body them while you have like this extra level that they don't have, and build a huge lead off of that, and then play the rest of the lane from there. And then from there, it's like Ogre as usual. It's like nothing that different. Abaddon, somewhere between A and B tier, I think. Let's put him in B tier for now. Like all save heroes in pub games, they just tend to go up a little bit because people on your team overcommit, people on the enemy team overcommit, and save heroes just have an easier time getting value in those situations. At the higher level, people are leaning more towards like being the one doing the killing rather than being the one saving. It's kind of hard to describe in this right now, but like the laning stage is not strong enough compared to like some of these other supports. Even though the dispel on the shield is actually still quite good, it's just I don't know. I guess it's just not worth it compared to these other things going on. I think he's better than he used to be at a high level, but still a little bit behind others. In the pubs, again, just doesn't matter. The fact that you can save yourself, save your allies, and even scale, because like core Abaddon is a thing, like, you know, it's just better than at the pro scene. Chen went from being one of the most broken supports in the game to being very meh, just because so many other heroes got a lot of cool stuff with their innate abilities and facets. And his is interesting. I just think it's weak compared to others, and something needs to happen there. If you know how to play Chen though, like I think you'll do fine. We can like move him up here, but the typical way you want to play Chen, which is like fairly greedy early game into tempo, that tends to be lacking in pub games. It's like pretty weak. So I'm gonna leave him down in like C to D tier, honestly. We could probably move him down, but again, like if you know what you're doing, it's fine. So we'll leave him in C tier. Spirit Breaker, so at a high level, I think we actually could have moved him up a little bit. In your pubs, he brings a little lockdown. That's often missing. He's got scaling potential. That's pretty good. The issue is his laning stage is pretty awkward. So depending on your MMR bracket, you may know how to get by with that. But if you don't, like, you're never going to pick up steam unless you happen to get a couple kills, which, you know, could happen. But his laning stage is just so much more awkward compared to every other hero. You need to know what you're doing in terms of like creep equilibrium, pull camps, how to like roam and then come back, and like the carry needs to know how to be left on their own. So in pub games, your lane like might go really bad and you might just lose off of that. But if you get through the lane, it's pretty useful. You just like keep ganking around, which is pretty good right now. If you have active heroes, that's again like the next weak part is like, do you have active heroes to go play around, or do you have a bunch of like 3 farming cores and then a 4th farming, you know, jungle pudge? Then you're not going to be doing very much. So because of that, I think we'll leave him in C tier for now, but maybe we'll revisit it. Ancient Apparition, I think is like pretty middle ground as a support. I think he's floating around like 50% win rate. His laning stage is a little weak, which is why the pros don't like to play him. But they do like his, like, you know, the anti-heal from the ult when you need it. In your pub games, like the weak laning stage is not so much of an issue, and then you still kind of bring the anti-heal, a lot of magic amp and magic burst for early kills if that happens. Your scaling is like kind of fine, honestly. So I don't know, I might just leave him here for now, somewhere between here. Silencer, I think somewhere between A and B. Let's stick him in A tier for now, just because he has the infinite scaling, steal the enemy intelligence. If you're playing hard support Silencer, you're going for the facet that refreshes the silence, which will catch a lot of people off guard. It makes him really good versus the people who would buy like some kind of dispel versus him, especially those mobile heroes. You can get them killed in that second refreshed silence, which does pierce debuff immunity. So I think that's where a lot of the value comes from. And then, you know, just being annoying with Q, scaling with your intelligence steal, and then like Glaze of Wisdom in the late game. So many people find him very annoying, and I think especially do not buy the dispels required to play versus Silencer, even with the facet in consideration. So you just get a lot more value. But at the high level, people are like, oh, Silencer, dispels. Yeah, I got affected by a second silence, but like it was really short, and I itemized for that as well. So it doesn't work out as well at the higher tiers of Dota, but in the average pub game does pretty well. Jakiro works out well in pub games. I think I'll put him in A tier for now. Really strong laning stage, and then just generally useful for the rest of the game. You can push things on your own, AoE stun, decent damage in team fights. For facets, I think Liquid Fire is just easier to use, especially as support Jakiro. The Liquid Frost has more damage potential, but it requires you to commit more to get value out of it. For example, you use it, you have to attack several times. You have to commit Dual Breath to get the extra damage procs on the Liquid Frost, even with your like double attack, which is cool. Liquid Fire is just easier. You throw it once, that's it. You can back off, you can commit more, right? It works on towers. It is just easier for position 5 Jakiro, in my opinion. But if you want more scaling potential and you want to do some kind of meme build with the double attack on hit effect stuff, then you do want Liquid Frost, but you probably want to play like position 4 Jakiro or offlane mid Jakiro rather than position 5 Jakiro. Tusk as a position 5, I think, is a bit tricky to run in pub games. The higher in MMR you are, the easier it is, and in those situations I might bump him up to B tier, but I think his facets are still a little bit awkward compared to others, so I don't really love it right now, especially for the average Dota game where you have like a very weak carry because they're picking like the hardest scaling Medusa, whatever. They just don't work well with Tusk, so I'd keep him in the C tier or maybe even D tier. Alch 5 is similar, like it technically works, but to make it work just requires game knowledge from you and your cores, and do you want to depend on that? I don't know about that, guys. So I'd probably put him in like D tier for pubs. The lower MMR you go, the higher you are, I think you can maybe make it work off of like giving a bottle to the mid. Again, that's only going to pay off at the highest levels, right? And then you will be given space at some point to farm an Aghanims to give to someone to hit like a very powerful power spike. Again, do you trust that guy with that, I don't in pub games, I'll be honest. Like, I might in my games, but for you guys, like, is that what you want to do? I don't think so. So I'd stick it down in D tier. Now, maybe you're just gonna like try to scale yourself, which is like fair, but I think there's better heroes for that rather than Alchemist. Nature's Prophet. You guys know I love Nature's Prophet. I just think his facets and innate abilities are so weird. I'm not even factoring them into like where he is, I guess. Like the thing is, he's still good in pub games just because Sprout is good and Teleport is good. They got changed, but the global rotation element and the ability to scale really well yourself and then like show up everywhere is still really good in pub games, and I would probably bump him up because you can get by your weak laning stage. Like, that's where the nerfs hurt him the most, or I should say changes, which kind of feel like nerfs in the end. I think that's what hurt him the most. But in your pub games where that matters less, and there's more like longer games, things that draw out, get drawn out. There we go, words. You're gonna get value out of him, and I think the Ironwood tree is probably better. At some point, you get to like push towers, but I just don't. I miss the scouting potential of the Treants at that point. Yet the heal facet also does not feel amazing. So I think his facets are just in such an awkward spot. And then like his innate ability, like you do more damage in your trees. Who cares? Who cares? You don't feel it at all. So I think if any of those get changed and become more noticeably good, like he'll shoot up a lot, which is probably why they're trying to be careful, because he's a menace in pub games. So I can understand being cautious with it. Right now, I just don't think he's great in the grand scheme of the meta, but just the nature of a global rotating hero with scale potential, I would still put him fairly high. So let's leave him in B tier as a balance. Pudge is better than he used to be because of Flayer's hook facet, does more damage from long hooks away, like while you hide in trees. That's the hard part. Like, is your carry going to help you set up hooks, or do you just have to do it? If you can hit the hooks, move him up. I'd say like maybe B tier. If you can't, C to D tier. Probably D tier because your team is probably going to tilt out because like I have a Pudge 5 on my team, right? And it's like, okay, fair. I get it. There's a lot of griefy Pudge 5s. But if you're genuinely trying to play it, I think it can work, but you'll do better if you have teammates who help set up the hook, and that's just a lot to depend on. So now it's like, how good do you think you can individually land hook? And that's why I'm still not a huge fan of it in pub games. Treant Protector, lane winning hero in pubs, still underestimated. I don't know how somehow, like he's been at the top for so long, but you just walk up and punch people. Sapling gave a lot of extra utility to your spell. You might still want to use it on heroes, like that's fine, but at times you can't. Throwing on the ground has a lot of extra value, such as for your own farm potential. Max Leech Seed's kind of the build right now. Take Sapling. The Primordial Power, or whatever it's called, it's interesting, like conceptually what it might do, because it's base damage. But one, I don't think you're doing that as position 5. But 2, I just think it's like not quite there yet. So just go with the Sapling, just play like the old Treant Protector, and you'll do fine. Veno's also going up to A tier for pubs. I think you just win pretty much any lane. Getting your Poison Touch as an innate ability has been really good. It does not do a lot of damage at level 1. I know that. Or like level 1 being like the default level 0 free one you get. But the fact that you can start Q and have some extra damage from your innate ability, I think is really good for him. You typically still take 2 points in it, and then just Patient 0 is crazy amounts of damage and slow in team fights. Plague Carrier, getting buffed a little bit. Interesting idea. I haven't tried it too much myself yet. I think it'll work better on position 4 Veno. For position 5 Veno, just do like Plague Carrier, no, not Plague Carrier, Patient 0, and just play the old Venomancer way, and you'll do great. Shadow Demon is a little bit of a tricky hero to play in pubs. There is a lot of potential off of Disruption as a save tool versus the enemies, and as a setup for your teammates if they pick anything to go with that setup. The ultimate as a break is very good versus certain heroes. The ability to create illusions for like a Chaos Knight or against a Chaos Knight is really good. But in terms of ease of execution compared to others, I think he is tough. I would probably move him down a tier for pub games. The higher up in MMR you go, I think he moves up a little bit, maybe to like B or A tier, depending on the draft. but as a just general pub hero, I would probably keep him in the C tier. Vengeful Spirit, I think, is a better core hero right now off of the Soul Strike facet. As a support, I think you're technically supposed to get the Magic Missile facet, but I think there might be room to still get Soul Strike. It's just like pretty good in the laning stage, which is kind of her weak spot right now, is that laning stage. The negative armor is really good. Like if you think about other popular heroes right now, again, if you're following the meta, Templar Assassin, SF, Slardar, Weaver. So adding another source of negative armor is pretty good when your team already has some, and that's what Venge does. The Wave of Terror is really good. There's like better supports. Like for example, if your team does not have the Weaver, like you could just play Weaver and provide the Swarm. But the fact that she is like a core gives you like some scaling potential right now for longer drawn out games. So if you like her, it's fine. I think I'll probably just leave her in B tier. Gyrocopter's a little bit of a tricky one. At the highest level, he is mostly a core hero now. Support Gyrocopter just became harder to run. You might still see it as a like flexing, but the reason it's like it's a pain is because look at the other supports you're probably running into and how are you going to beat them? Like you try to use Rocket Barrage against Weaver, he just runs. You're trying to like chase people and there's like a bunch of brambles on the ground. There's a Clockwork Cogs like knocking you away. There's Witch Doctor. You're losing the trade into Witch Doctor's Voodoo Festeration. These are position 5s, I know, but many of them can play position 4 as well. So if you are playing position 5 Gyrocopter, like that's what you're having to play into, and it's just not easy. In your pub games, people will still underestimate Rocket Barrage, and you get value out of that, and you'll get kills, and then you'll scale up as a core. So if you know how to do that, I think B tier is about right. But if you don't, I think like C tier, because its innate ability is Chop Shop. I think that's just harder to use as a support. I have not figured out like a great build for that. There's a little bit more potential for core Gyrocopter. Again, still a bit unexplored. So maybe there's some cool builds that will be figured out and then he'll go up a little bit more. But for right now, I think his win rate is just not very impressive. And I really recommend you guys just play one of these guys, which we're going to talk about soon. Snapfire full bore is pretty interesting. It does make it a little hard to hit because it's pretty skinny, but it does let you stay far back, which I think is good for position 5. And you're seeing Snapfire picked up even at the highest level every now and then because of Phoenix. Little Shredder is one of the best spells versus Phoenix Egg. If you feel like you're seeing a lot of Phoenix, then maybe you could consider Snapfire. The issue with Snapfire in pub games is that you need the team coordination. 1, the cookie to launch teammates into the fight, and then 2, your ultimate. You need someone to set it up. It's one of the strongest level 1 ultimates in the game, but it's very difficult to just hit, right? You can't just like launch it. You need someone to like, please stun that guy for 1 second and I will kill them. And then no one picks a stun, or they have stuns and they don't want to play with you because they want to farm in their own jungle. It's like, oh, it's so frustrating. And because of that, it's a pain. At the same time, she scales really well as a support because you sometimes see core Snapfire. So if you're willing to deal with those coordination issues, then I think she's decent. But if not, I don't think you reliably reach that scaling potential because you didn't pick up those early kills. So I don't know, I'd leave her in this B tier. I think the higher in MMR you go, it's like B to A tier. The lower MMR, maybe B to C tier. Winter Wyvern, I think I'm just going to leave in B tier. I think both facets have their place. The attack range damage one, if you're looking to scale, if you want to enable your teammates more, the mana one. For position 5 Winter Wyvern, you're probably supposed to take the mana heart or whatever it's called. I've seen like Holy Locket builds with that. You just restore a bunch of mana. That's going to work better if your team has some tempo to it. So you're going to miss that out in like the average Dota game. But plus side, you get the benefit of the enemy overcommitting into your heal and you just like save someone. And also the ultimate, right? It becomes easier to use in pub games. People tend to clump up. They don't properly stay scattered. So you get a lot of good ultimates. So I think there's like pros and cons to that. So I'm going to leave it in B tier. Grimstroke going down in pub games. Just the coordination required to work with Inkswell and Soulbind is tough in the average Dota game. I would, the lower in MMR, I would bring him down and further. The higher in MMR, it goes up because he is still a decent lane combo inks well with other heroes. Again, just look at the other popular stuff though. Who are you running down? Are you running down Weaver? No. Are you trying to run through Brambles, through Clockwork Cogs? You're like waiting for your stun to go off and this guy's killing you with Voodoo Festration. He's just not as good at the highest tier, but when you run into these heroes less, it's sort of okay. The other issue, though, is that his facet is pretty much, like, it's what he had before, which is why he dropped. Like, other people are getting new stuff, and he's getting his old stuff just reworked into the facet. I will say the facet, fine art. I've played around with that. I think it's really cool. It's just a bit tough to use because you can hit multiple camps in the laning stage. I think it's better for position 4, though, because you're going to end up nuking the wave a couple times and shove it in, which is not what you want as position 5. I also think it just needs a buff in general compared to Instigate, which makes it a lot easier to use Inkswell, especially with the Shard, which is what you should probably be going for if you're playing Grimstroke, but I think fine art's cool. I don't know, but just the consistency of the laning stage and the coordination required, I would move him down in pub games. I think Oracle for pub games goes up to A tier. The save potential on your teammates, the fastest are pretty decent, and then the dispel is really good versus some of the popular heroes like Darkseer, one of the best offlaners right now. Just remove Ion Shell. Some of these other heroes we talked about, like the classic Omni Knight. Oh, no knows how to deal with it. Just dispel, right? Things like that. I think it's pretty good. And now that the double-edged nature of Oracle spells are gone, I mean, it's been like that for a while, but if you were ever scared of playing Oracle before, it's like much easier nowadays. And a lot of people in the lane just underestimate how much nuke damage you have off your Purifying Flames. So I've seen a lot of position 5 save hero Oracles end up with tons of kills in pub games. If you spend the time to learn Oracle and your opponents do not know how Oracle works, you just always come off to a good start, and then you're saving your teammates with like tons of items that you have. Lion, I think we keep in B tier. 2 stuns is good. Always good in pub games which are lacking crowd control. The infinite scaling, also nice. His win rate's kind of low, and I think it's just because other people are stronger than he is to start. There's a lot of meme builds going on right now too, with the ultimate turning you into melee form, and I think that's lowering the win rate. He's also just a generally tricky hero anyways. Like, even when he's broken at the pro level, his win rate tends to be pretty like 50% or lower at pubs, just because he's tricky to use, even though it sounds straightforward. And I'm guilty of this. My win rate with Lion's awful. So I think for pub games, I think it just ends up B tier. Like, when you balance out the pros of infinite scaling and like all the lockdown versus the cons of like being a bit tricky, I think B tier sounds about right if you spend the time to learn him. Okay, A tier heroes, not IO. The coordination required is just way too hard in a pub game. If you're playing party, it's different. Move him back up, but the coordination required, I don't even need to talk about it. You guys know it in your hearts. It's just not there. D tier. Enigma, another hero similar to Batrider who needs to play pretty greedy. I think he's got more late game potential than Batrider, so I'll put him in C tier. You gotta know what you're doing with Enigma 5. Otherwise, you're just gonna have a terrible time. And it does require some greed, which is a bit tricky in pub games. And I think the lower in MMR you go, I would put him lower. The higher up you are, move him up a little bit. He's just less straightforward to run, but the pros do like him. I think I'm fine with Enchantress here. I might move her down a little bit in pub games. The thing with Enchantress is that you tend to win the lane off of just being really strong and having the creeps. And then at the pro level, you then go rotate with that creep and have impact in the other lanes while your carry, who already had a good game, continues to have a good game left alone, and you like rotate as needed. In pubs, you can do that first step, you rotate out, people are like, what are you doing? I'm still farming. And then the carry dies after you got him like 3 kills, and now like everything's gone. So that part's like, and the whole tempo of the early game Enchantress is gone, but she scales really well. So if you just like win your lane and you don't even bother rotating and you just like, I'll just farm this jungle camp to the side and that way I'm still nearby to help my carry when he tries to overextend, it kind of works out. So if you know how to play Enchantress, I would still leave her in like A to B tier. You won't play her the same way the pros play her, but it works. If you're just trying to pick a new hero to learn, Enchantress is probably not the place to start. You got to play a lot of Enchantress to be a good Enchantress player. And if you're just thinking of like casual, hey, the new patch is out, Zach, what do I play? probably move her lower down. Like, don't start with her. Maybe we'll put her in B tier as like a middle ground of all that. ET, another hero you have to be a little bit of an ET specialist to get the most out of. I think he's often underappreciated in pub games, and so you can get a lot of really good trades and then scale from there. It's not as straightforward as others. I would probably put him B tier because I think some of the value to him at the high level is that not only do you have a decent laning stage, but then you amplify your teammates with the spirit and you set up with sleep, all that sort of stuff. In pub games, you're going to lack that. But in pub games, you have that scaling potential. ET in the late game is pretty crazy. I'm going to put him B tier. There's going to be some like ET players who are like, Zach, you're super underestimating. I know, but there's only like 5 of you guys. In the grand scheme of pubs, he is less common, and I think it'll be easier to play other heroes. So somewhere between B and A tier. Disruptor, I would move him down, I think. Don't take Kinetic Fence. It's like too... I mean, there's probably cases for it. I think the combo of the old Kinetic Field plus ult is just too good to pass up. I think Kinetic Fence needs a buff. It's a little tricky. His laning stage is not as straightforward as others, but the Shard is still pretty good. And then Long Range Glimpse is a pub classic. People just don't position well, and you glimpse him back for free kills. I think he's just weaker compared to other heroes right now, though, because his innate ability and facets, they're okay, but there's better ones like these other heroes up here, and because of that, in the direct comparison of laning stage, whatever, I think he's not as good. But the reposition off glimpse, pubs, you know, he goes up a little. I don't think his win rate is amazing. I'm going to keep him in B tier for now. If you know what you're doing, I think he'll be fine. Crystal Maiden is a little bit of a tricky one here. Her win rate in pub games is the best at the lowest tiers of Dota right now. I think people underestimate how much damage she does. You get to pick up some kills. The higher up you go, I think people appreciate that more and then know how to just kill a Crystal Maiden in the laning stage or like some of these other strong supports. At the pro scene, she actually starts to go back up again because of the tempo and the team play that is enabled by her passive mana regen, giving out to her teammates, and then the setup from Frostbite, stuff like that. So I think it goes up again, but in pubs, from like mid-tier Dota to like Immortal Dota, there's just stronger supports, I think, that are a bit more consistent. So her win rate dips in those MMRs compared to like Herald through Crusader. B tier maybe for that reason. Yeah, I'm not fully sure. I don't play too much Crystal Maiden lately. I've been playing a lot of these S tier heroes, so maybe that can be adjusted. You guys can let me know in the comments. I think we moved every hero out of A tier. Like all the heroes that we started with, I moved them out. We aren't really moving the S tier heroes though, spoiler alert. So Witch Doctor's Voodoo Festiration is crazy. It is so efficient for what it does. So you turn it on. You want to keep it on for as long as you can because there's an upfront activation cost and then a cheaper mana per second. I'm not saying you just leave it on forever because that's obviously like there's a cutoff point, but let's say like 5 seconds. You activate it, you keep it on for 5 seconds. At level 1, you will get 150 damage, 75 self-heal, and it costs you like 75 mana. It is insane value right now. And what a lot of people are doing is just running at the opponent. Now at level 1, tone it down a little bit. Don't burn all your mana because once you have Maledict at level 2, now you just wait for the opportunity. They step up a little too far, and by a little too far, I mean at a normal spot in the lane. You press Maledict, you turn on Voodoo Festiration, you throw a blood grenade at them, and you just walk at them. And they might slow you, they might stun you, it doesn't matter. Continue to walk at them because the Voodoo Festiration radius is massive, and you probably just kill them. If not, you just do an insane amount of damage. It is ridiculous. You buy like a Clarity. The Clarity like mana to damage ratio is insane because of Voodoo Festiration right now. So he is pretty much permabanned at the pro scene, and in pubs, that's not different. Out of the laning stage, you just get back to old Witch Doctor, which in pub games, he used to be mainly a pub hero because of the way lucky casks, maledict, late game ultimates that people then group for, stuff like that, right? That is all still there. So in your pub games, that's fantastic. That was never good enough for the pro scene because the counterplay. But now that his laning stage is ridiculous, now he's always being banned. So because of that, he is an S tier hero, pub or pro scene. He is fantastic. Clockwork, I might move to A tier, might stay in S tier. I'm not fully sure. So expanded armature is fantastic. In the laning stage, just walk at people, pop it, back out, kick the cogs at them, try to get multi-bounces. You're gonna have a great laning stage. At low MMRs, actually through all of them, like I get a bunch of kills in the laning stage with this. Throughout all the MMRs, you'll probably get kills. At the lowest MMRs, you'll get more kills because people just don't know how to deal with it. At the highest MMRs, you'll get more kills because people will work with you to kill them in that time. The middle ground is the awkward part where you go in and you're like, oh, I'm really strong right now. I'm setting them up. I just need a little help from my carry. And the carry's like, I gotta focus on my last hits. I'm Medusa. I don't do anything with the clockwork, right? And that's where it's like, okay. Like you'll still have good trades. You'll make space for them. And then that part's like fine. You then enter that awkward period where again, at low MMRs, you're probably just solo killing people with expanded armature, battery assault, the hookshot onto them, kills. The highest level, you are setting up for your team. You're hookshotting in, battery assault, whatever, like scouting with rocket flare. You're doing a bunch with your team. It's that middle ground. You're like, okay, I had a decent laning stage. I made space for my farming cores. And now they're all still farming. And no one wants to play with me, even though I'm the initiating support, which is commonly lacking in pubs. And now you just kind of have to wait for your cores to all farm, and then you will go back to initiating for them because none of them picked it, right? So that's where it's kind of funny. I think at the low end and the high end, he's really good. In the middle, I think he's still good. I am still like A tier, just like is he an S tier at those like Archon to Divine level? I'm not fully sure. I'm going to say yes. I think a lot of people just don't know how to use expanded armature correctly, which is that you're looking for the cog bounces a lot, and it's just insane value. But maybe somewhere between S and A tier. He's not as broken as Witch Doctor. Dark Willow's Facet, Thorny Thicket is crazy. It just spawns more brambles, and that's it. In the laning stage, because of the way that, like the trees are, the creeps block your stuff, Thorny Thicket, Dark Bramble is balanced around the idea that you only hit one Dark Bramble. And if you've ever looked at the scaling, it looks like a normal spell. It's like, okay, 100-ish damage, level 1, 300-ish damage, level 4. Like, yeah, that sounds reasonable. Then you think like, wait, you can hit multiple brambles. And now from 100 damage, it's like 200 damage at level 1 for one spell. At max level, it's like, wait, we're pushing 700 damage with one spell. That doesn't seem very balanced. It's not. So when you can spawn multiple brambles and people have to run through multiple brambles potentially, or they just sit there and you attack them with your core, it is busted. You can even use it for farming in the laning stage. You like drop it, creeps walk through multiple brambles now. So there's just a ton of value from brambles. You just take it and just spam it out in the laning stage. I mean, not like totally spam it out. You like wait for them in a good position, then you use it. Super, super strong. As a position 5, Bedlam can be cast on allies. So that was the weak point of Dark Willow 5 in the past, is that, you know, you had a decent laning stage, you provide a lot of control, but Bedlam was really hard to use because you're a squishy position 5. You didn't get that many items. But now, it's not the most recent change, but it's relatively recent. You just throw it on whatever allies, and they go in. So now just all your spells are value. And so as a position 5, as a position 4, she's great. Sneak peek, she's going to be in the position 4 tier list too. Just fantastic hero. Lots of scaling potential in the late game, even though she lost her attack speed talent. That part's kind of sad. But I think even then, like at some point you get Ags, you get like a Moon Shard, whatever attack speed item if you're getting in that ultra late game. She's really good. So just throughout the entire game, I think she provides so much value. I'm a huge fan of Weaver right now. I've been spamming him a bunch. He is a little greedy as a position 5. Now at the highest tiers, it's going to be fine. But there is a dip in Weaver's win rate the lower in MMR you go, because he is different from other hard supports. He kind of functions by like winning the lane by having Geminate attack for free and then Shikuchi. So that's what's made him super strong. But you then are a greedy position 5 who doesn't actually have any form of lockdown, stuff like that. And to continue doing well, you need to play high tempo with your team and like scale up from there. And that's why at the highest level, it works. Like you win your laning stage, people know how to go with it. They're playing with you, you get to be active, all of that. The lower MMRs, you don't get as much activity, and they're tilted because they're like, Weaver as a support, right? And they don't believe in it, and so they're just like angry preemptively. And that's why I think it drops off there. Plus side, you're underestimated, so you might get extra kills and then scale up into a normal core. So you got that for you. So I would put him somewhere between S and A tier with that in mind. That the higher in MMR you go, people aren't tilting and they know how to play with you, so you're S tier. The lower you are, drop it to like A to B tier because you're having to deal with people not knowing how to work with Weaver 5, and you're depending on being able to capitalize on the enemy not knowing how Weaver 5 works. But compared to like Witch Doctor, Dark Willow, Clockwork, I think these guys are just straight up good. Like no matter what, any role, or not any, like position 4, position 5, whatever, your team's not going to tilt probably. You're going to be really strong. It's straightforward plan mostly compared to Weaver. So somewhere between S and A still in my books. I would just spam him. I am just spamming him. But for the lower brackets, you know, maybe somewhere here. Okay, finally, last. Phoenix. Phoenix Fire Spirits are really good in the lane. Now they apply Mischance. So your laning stage is pretty strong. And then there's a fair amount of tanky heroes in the meta right now. So the percent HP heal or damage works if it's on your team or on the opponent's team. Egg, classic team fight. I think it's just a little tricky. So there's like two elements to this. The part with Egg being good and working with the teammates after the laning stage, that's the part that's a little lacking in pubs, and that's why it like starts to move down. But the Phoenix players out there know that Phoenix is often very underestimated in pubs, even though it's been like this forever. People still don't adjust to it. And Phoenix's damage is actually pretty crazy. So a Phoenix 5 player who knows what they're doing will have a good laning stage, and then they'll just be solo killing people around the map. They shouldn't be getting solo kills, but they are. And because of that, even though people aren't working with you, you're just killing the enemies and farming jungle camps. To me, that kind of keeps Phoenix around this S to A tier. And I don't know. I can't decide. I know all the Phoenix players are like S tier, S tier, S tier. And I think so. I think so. At the highest level, I think Phoenix is definitely S tier. Probably drops a little bit the lower in MMR you go, but somewhere between S and A tier at the least. Okay, that's what I got. It ended up being a long video because I rambled about like every hero on here, and we could probably even add more, but we're not. The thing is, like pub games, right? You can make a lot work, which kind of messes up the concept of a tier list, but I know this is what a lot of you guys were asking for, like a really pub-focused tier list. So here it is. Let me know if you like this format, if you didn't mind the length of this video, whatever it ends up being. Or if you do want it to still be shorter, like we'll work on future ones being like more focused and cut down. But this is what we got for now, and I'm leaving it this way. So thank you for watching. Go play these heroes in particular. I would say like these, the ones that were S tier and stayed S tier, right? They're crazy. Even though Warlock has the highest win rate actually. Like, so if you wanted to put these in order, it's probably something like this. These two just do really well in pub games at all MMRs, but otherwise, there you go. S tier heroes, go have fun.